Hey everybody, this is Chris and welcome to my VR6. Today we're going to talk a little bit about what makes this car special. The Mark II Jetta just didn't show up out of nowhere. To really understand why this boxy little sedan became such an icon, we have to go back a little bit further, back to the original. The Mark I Jetta first hit the streets in 1979. It was basically a Golf with a trunk, designed specifically for Americans who weren't sold on hatchbacks. It was front-wheel drive, super light, and to be honest, a little bit underpowered, but it was scrappy. It had great steering, a solid suspension, and first and foremost, it was incredibly easy to work on and just begged to be modified. Later, when the first GTI came out, everything changed. Suddenly, Volkswagen had this great performance sports car on their hands that really just carried the way into the Mark II. In a way, the timing couldn't have been better. In the United States, the golden age of the muscle cars had faded. Big V8s were being strangled by emissions regulations, gas prices were rising, and the insurance companies were cracking down on anything remotely fun. American performance cars were losing their edge, and a new generation of drivers were looking for something different. The GTI and cars like it were the answer. Lightweight, tossable, fuel efficient, and surprisingly quick. It wasn't about straight line power anymore. It was about the corners, the feel, and doing more with less. In 1984, the Mark II Jetta had dropped. It was a little bigger, a little smoother, and a lot more refined. Volkswagen was growing up, but they didn't lose their soul. The Mark II kept the tossable chassis, the lightweight design, and the driving dynamics that people loved, but it came wrapped in sharper styling and better build quality. In the late 1980s, if you picked up a GLI, that's the performance trim for the Jetta, you got Recaro sport seats, disc brakes all around, and a close ratio 5-speed transmission, and even a high revving 16-valve engine. It wasn't just a sedan anymore, it was a sports car with 4 doors, some of which came with 2. By the time the early 1990s rolled around, the Mark II had built a series following. It was cheap, it was fun, and it was everywhere. And more importantly, it was incredibly easy to modify. People were loading them on coilovers, swapping in European lighting, smoothing engine bays, tucking bumpers, all the stuff you'd expect. It was the perfect canvas for both clean builds and wild ones. But something was missing, and that's where the VR6 comes in. In 1991, Volkswagen released a brand new engine called the VR6. It first showed up in the Corrado and then in the Mark III Golf and Jetta. It was weird, a narrow angle 6-cylinder engine with a single cylinder head. That narrow V design made it compact enough to fit where a 4-cylinder used to be. And it made real power. We're talking 172 to 190 horsepower depending on the version and the cars they put it in. And the great thing about it has a torque curve that came in early and pulled hard. Combined with that really short 5-speed gear ratio, these cars screamed. And the sound, it was deep, snarling, and it just growls with a sound that no other Volkswagen engine has. Once those engines started showing up in junkyards, the swap era was on. By 94 and 95, guys were pulling VR6s out of crashed Corrados and Golf GTIs and figuring out how to shoehorn them into their Mark IIs. At this point, there were no kits, no engine mounts you could just buy off eBay and wire this thing together like it's so easy to do with a Honda. Not talking trash on Hondas, and I think it's incredible that the aftermarket is so great for you to be able to put those cars together like they are. But we're talking about an era where guys really had to figure stuff out. Building their own engine mounts, hacking up wire, trying to hope a transmission would pair up, and after that you had to get it all into a car that was not designed to get to take an engine with that much power. At the end of it though, if you made it work, you had a 2,200 pound car that just had such incredible amount of torque and that 200 horsepower that we were talking about earlier. It was really a great combination. Some of the first documented swaps popped up on Volkswagen enthusiast forums, and a few even made it into early tuner magazines. New German Performance and Autotech were one of the first couple shops to help make sense of the madness of trying to make this stuff happen. Then you had guys like Paul G, who built one of the first fully documented VR6 Mark II Jettas on the old forums. His car had a Corrado-sourced engine, a full interior, and all the gauges worked like it came off the factory floor. That build became legendary. And if we're talking about pop culture, we at least have to mention Jesse's white Jetta from The Fast and the Furious. He may have lost that race to Johnny Tran, but Johnny had $100,000 under that hood. So, Spirit, thank you for providing us with direct port nitrous injection, 4-core intercoolers, ball bearing turbos, and titanium valve springs, and thank you, Jesse. So to close this out, I'd just like to talk for a second about why this car matters to me. You know, there's just not a lot of these things out there on the road anymore. I don't know if I've ever seen another Jetta two-door coupe around my area. I definitely haven't seen one in the last 15 to 20 years. So that alone makes this thing worth saving. They remind me of a bygone era when before you could get on the internet and just order any kind of custom part from anywhere in the world to make things work. And you know, thank God for that happening. It has enabled a whole generation of people to do things that they never would have been able to do before. And don't get me wrong, I use the internet and ChatGPT and all these things to make my life easier every time possible. But I like having this reminder that things used to be done a certain way, and it would just be a shame for me to let this car fall away. So thank you for watching my VR6. Make sure and like, subscribe, and leave a comment to help out the algorithm. And I hope you'll stick with me next time. And maybe in this next video we'll talk about this big stack of rubber that's been sitting beside me the whole time. Thanks.